The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast as we continue our Premiership preview specials. BBC commentator Liam McLeod joins me, David Currie, as we ponder the season ahead, one team at a time. Today, to coin a phrase, we are Hibsing it, and I don't mean that in a negative way, for we are all about the Hibs, and with that in mind, Matty Fairnie from the Long Bangers podcast joins us. Matty, how are you?
Name?
Well, I think that's what I'm saying, Liam. I think we have to find out what incarnation that is all about. Long Bangers, Matty, could you explain?
Yeah, it's nothing bad. It's a game that we played when we were kids. If there's only two of you out with the football, you just take long shots into each other pretty much. You were striker and goalie rolled into one. And that's where the name came from.
All right, so were you long banging last Thursday night, or were you watching the game?
I was long crying last Thursday night. Yeah, it was. I watched the game, and then we recorded yesterday to talk about it. Unfortunately,
you weren't among the throng of angry Hibs supporters giving the team and the manager pelters after the game. Then
no. Although I think right in the full time whistle, they might have heard me shouting from Dunfermline, where I'm based.
So, what do you make of the Andorran adventure, or rather misadventure, and what does it do to your feelings ahead of the new campaign?
Well, first of all, the game itself was a shocker. You almost are left scratching your head about how we could have been so bad. Really, I mean, there wasn't, I think, until Joe Newell came on, there wasn't a single player got pass marks. We were making silly mistakes, passing the ball straight out the pitch. We looked like we had totally underestimated the opposition. Now, the manager had said that he had watched them and he knew what they were all about and had warned the players. But it did look like we were treating it like a pre-season game, and it really bit us on the backside. I don't think it will matter in the long run, though. I think we'll comfortably tuck them away on Thursday night at the risk of famous last words. I didn't see too much from them that I was worried about. That I wouldn't expect us to not win by a few goals at Easter Road.
Liam, Matty's tempting fate there, but we've read this story before, haven't we? Progress, Niederkorn, Lincoln, Red Imps, etc. Scottish teams have a habit of getting caught cold in these qualifiers.
I was doing Sports Sound on Wednesday night from Rugby Park. It's a Kilmarnock Wraith game in the League Cup, and I was talking about in fact, we were talking to our colleague Brian McLaughlin, who was in Andorra doing the pre-match stuff with Lee Johnson, and I did bring up those two matches actually. I was at both of those in Luxembourg and Gibraltar. Rangers and Celtic were beaten respectively. Huge shocks. And this one's right up there in terms of, the role of dishonour from Scottish clubs in these early European ties. And you can get your fingers burned, no matter who you're playing. I mean, it's one of those, a lot of people professionally would say to you within football, would say there's no easy games in Europe now, but a team from Andorra is probably as good a draw as Hibs could have got. I'm like Matty, I think they'll turn that around. And look, there were mistakes that led to goals for Escaldis. And that Joe Newell goal late on's huge for Hibs. That just takes a lot of the pressure away, because 2-0, you still think Hibs have enough at home to turn that around. But 2-1, absolutely. You can never say never, but I would expect, like when Celtic lost to Red Imps, they turned it round pretty comfortably in the second leg in Glasgow. I would expect Hibs to do likewise in Edinburgh.
After the game, I think Joe Newell, who you referenced there, Matty, said it was embarrassing, but the gaffer, Lee Johnson, disagreed on that point. Where do you stand? I think I know.
I would say it's embarrassing. Although the caveat to that is if we win the second leg, it gets maybe not forgotten about, but it doesn't get spoken about as much as it will if we go out the tie. That's pretty much where it lands. It's embarrassing if that's fatal for us. If we're comfortable in the next leg, nobody's really going to care that much about it until we go on a wee losing run later on in the season, when it will get cast up as a reason to sack the manager as these things go.
I will have to wait and see, Liam, how long a shadow that result casts over Hibs' start to the season, but it does put Lee Johnson under pressure, and I see wee echoes of Graham Alexander at Motherwell.
Well, that's another horrendous result against Sligo Rovers for Motherwell last year, and Graham Alexander didn't last beyond that, you know. I mean, I do think Lee Johnson is under severe pressure if he loses this tie. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But if he can somehow survive it and get through to the next round, which obviously, if they're going to get into the group stage, need to come through 3 ties. It's a monumental task. It's difficult, not impossible, but it's extremely difficult. We need to be in a position where Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen are coming through these qualifiers if they have to play them and getting into the group stage. Other countries manage it. Celtic and Rangers are, regulars in group stage, and they'll be in the group stage. Celtic in the Champions League, Rangers will be at the very least in the Europa League group. So we need the other teams to step up. No question. But it's going to be difficult for Hibs. But see if Lee Johnson can come through this tie, and you take what you get from the rest of the European campaign, however long that is for Hibs. But they've actually got a decent set of fixtures to start the league season. They don't play Hearts in a derby till October, and they play Celtic and Rangers that month as well. So they've got a trip to Pittodrie in amongst all that. It's the most difficult fixture, I think, in the opening set of games. But it's a relatively kind start to the season, you would have to say, for Hibs. So if Lee Johnson can turn this tie around, get through the next round in the League Cup as well, into the quarters, then he's got a good start to the Premiership campaign on paper. Hibs could be sitting pretty come October time when they go into the first derby of the season.
See, regardless, Matty, of how they fare in the European qualifying, is Lee Johnson under a bit of pressure anyway because of what happened last season? I mean, 5th place finish, but it wasn't exactly a memorable season.
He is. There's a sort of sizable chunk of the support who are at best undecided on him, and at worst already made up their mind that he's not the man for the job. I think he did enough last season to sort of deserve coming into this season. Personally, I like Lee Johnson. I think he's a good coach. But what I would say to that, though, is there's like a mountain evidence to sort of suggest otherwise. Things like the result on Thursday. Last season's League Cup campaign was a disaster. We never got out of the group stages. We got knocked out of the Scottish Cup at the first time asking to Hearts. We had another couple of bad results against them. And it was really sort of the end of season form that turned it around for him. If he starts this season badly, I think the knives will well and truly be out for him. Whether or not the board will act, though, is another matter, because they've backed him heavily. I mean, it looks like we're going to be signing Dylan Vente today. That's sort of the jungle drums roundabout. The Hibs Twitter are suggesting that's happening today with a sizable fee going. So I think the board are backing him.
Yeah, you've brought in a few. You mentioned the possible signing today. You brought in a 36-year-old striker, but you've lost Nisbet. Yeah,
and Nisbet will be a big miss. A very, very good player. I mean, our season turned around when he returned from injury last season. I think the other thing you have to consider, though, to offset that is we've got Martin Boyle back. He got his first minutes since almost a year ago, I think, on Saturday against Blackpool. So he's nearly ready to come back into the team. And I think Martin Boyle coming back in is more significant than Kevin Nisbet going out.
Do you agree with that, Liam?
Yeah, 100%. Martin Boyle is a massive player for Hibs. Getting him back so soon after the move away to Saudi Arabia was great for Hibs. Really good. And he just offers so much. I mean, he's a great finisher, and we all know how dangerous his pace is. And, hugely frustrating for him when he went back to be injured so relatively soon after coming in. He actually made a really good impression. He scored 4 in the 11 games he played in his return before injury, robbed him of the rest of the campaign, and it, of course, robbed him of a World Cup finals. He might not get that chance again. Who knows? But it was a heartbreaking season for Martin Boyle. He'll be very, very keen to make up for lost time, and he's a massive player for Hibs. Huge. Adam Lefondre, who you hinted at there, 36 now, has come in. He scored 13 goals in 24 appearances for Sydney last season. He's coming to Hibs, and he's obviously really experienced, but he still knows his way to goal. And Hibs will be hoping that he can actually make an impression. It's not always worked out when they bring veteran players in, Matty. You think the likes of Grant Holt, who scored a few goals for Hibs, but you'll be hoping that, this guy comes in and, is the answer to Kevin Nisbet's goals that have gone out the door.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Grant Holt's maybe an unfair example. I thought Holt was excellent for Hibs, but you could look at the likes of Shefke Kuke or Jonathan Johansson, who came in and absolutely flopped as experienced players at Hibs, or even Aidan McGeady last season. He sort of missed most of the season through injury. Lafondre's got goals in him. It's just a case of whether we can give him the service. So far in pre-season, it hasn't looked like that's been the case, and that's probably a bigger worry than Lafondre's ability to score.
So what, are you happy with the recruitment so far? You've got the new director of football, Brian McDermott, experienced manager in his own right. This is his time to earn his corn, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the recruitment's been really good. We had Will Fish come in last season. Last week. There was a bit of chat that we might have been able to get him permanently, but I think his future definitely lies with Man United. But he had an excellent end to the season last season. I was talking
to Michael Devlin, who was obviously at Hibs last season. He really rates Will Fish. He says this guy's a proper player, really good defender.
Yeah, it's big for us to get him in. I mean, he's a player that would be absolutely out of our price range otherwise. So to get him in on a season-long loan, excellent. We have Dylan Levitt that came from Dundee United. Again, very, very exciting talent. I think he's what our midfield has been missing. We need to get him on the ball more and dictating play. He didn't do that at all on Thursday night. But I think as he gets his fitness up and Hibs work out a way to get him into the system, he'll be a very important player for us. And then securing Ellie Yuan as well, which is another big fee for Hibs to bring him in, I think was really significant. So I don't think you'll find many Hibs fans with complaints about the recruitment this season.
You brought in a couple of goalkeepers as well, Boric and Wallacott. Does that mean David Marshall's time is maybe up as number one?
I think so. I think it was significant that Paul Hanlon got the captaincy off of David Marshall for this season. Marshall was captain last season. He isn't captain this season. I think that's an indication that he's not going to play regularly. He made a few high-profile mistakes last season that cost us points. Again, he was at fault for at least one of the goals on Thursday night. And I think there's a growing feeling around the Hibs support that Marshall probably needs to take sort of a back seat this season, and Wallacott would be the man to come in and claim that number one place.
How much do you know about him?
I think I read a little bit about him, said he was maybe suspect to long shots. He likes to punch rather than catch, but yeah,
sounds great then, eh? Sounds great,
Liam. Oh, sometimes that's what's called for, and it deals with it, doesn't it? I remember a coach back in my childhood who always said, if in doubt, kick it out. And if you're a goalkeeper, then obviously punching it away. If you're not 100% sure that you're going to catch it, then do it that way. It takes away the danger. But look, I think Lee Johnson's recruitment so far has been pretty good on paper. We never know. There's a lot of these guys who are coming in. Hearts and Aberdeen are signing players that we don't know much about as well. They'll be hoping that they can get them going quickly. But I think Matty's right. I think Ellie Yuan, I really thought he came on a game second half of last season. First half of last season, there were a few pundits who were kind of questioning Yuan, particularly in front of goal, decision making and all that kind of stuff. It's almost like there was a switch flicked. Something happened in the second half of the campaign. This guy's a weapon for Hibernian. If you've got Yuan on one side and Boyle on the other, and if they can get Lafondre scoring goals through the middle, then they've got a right good front three there potentially. And, they could all three of those could be in double figures. If Lee Johnson can get them going, then they could all be banging the goals in and setting each other up. It could be a really exciting season for Hibs.
Describing someone in Scotland as a weapon isn't always necessarily a
no, that's true.
A positive.
That's a good point. I meant it in a nice way, obviously.
A positive description, but I think he banged it. What did he get? 9 goals last season, Yuan?
Yeah, and it was the second. It was that run, wasn't it? The last sort of maybe four or 5 months of the campaign, Matty.
Yeah, I think you need to remember, Yuan's like a young guy. He doesn't speak English. It was his first time, obviously playing Scottish football. I think it just took him a bit of time to sort of settle and find his feet. But once he did, He used those feet very, very well, and I think he'll continue in that vein this season. He's definitely one to watch. Very, very exciting, very dangerous, very unpredictable. But I think we tipped him yesterday for our Player of the Year when we were doing our predictions on the podcast.
Oh, that's no pressure on his shoulders then. The long bangers are going for Elioun as Player of the Year. You're satisfied with the recruitment so far. Are there any gaps that need to be filled in your eyes?
Well, we needed a centre half, so Will Fish coming in helps there, and I think it's the centre forward and possibly a wide player as well is what we need. So if we get Vente in, I think that ticks off the centre forward, and then maybe we'd only be looking for a left winger just to give us a bit of cover there.
Liam, are you relatively satisfied with the strength and the depth of the Hibs squad?
Yeah, I think they look good. I really do. I think they're going to have a good campaign. I mean, Matty's right. The cups last season were diabolical for Hibs. They really were. And actually, when you look back over the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, Hibs are a good cup side. Mm-hmm. I mean, loads of trips to Hampden, loads of last 8 appearances. And as I say, beyond that, lots of cup finals. I think the frustration is that during that period over the last 25 years, they've only emerged with those 2 trophies, the League Cup and the Scottish Cup, 2007, 2016. And that, as with the other clubs as well, third place and a trophy is, unfortunately right now, is as good as it's going to get for everyone out with Celtic and Rangers. And if that happens, third spot and a final and a cup, that's a marvellous season. And if they can get into the group stage of the Conference League as well, then wow, that's a proper good season for the Hibs supporters.
That's all hypothetical there, stuff, gentlemen, but let's try and nail you down to make a solid prediction on how Hibs season is going to pan out. As always, Liam will give you the last word, so I'll go to Matty first of all. Matty, what's it going to be like?
On our episode yesterday, I think I pegged us for finalists in the Scottish Cup final, losing to one of the Old Firm. Semi-final of the League Cup. So I think we'll get at least 2 trips to Hampden this season, and 4th in the league behind either Aberdeen or Hearts.
And is that a successful season for you?
It's decent. I think most of us would take it. It's about where we should end up. I think we have the 5th largest budget, so I think in fairness you say anything 5th or above is acceptable. If we can get 3rd, then that's usually successful. 4th would do. And a good cup run. There is a school of thought that unless you win the cup, it's not a success. I don't think that's fair these days. I think Celtic and Rangers are so far in front of everybody else that it's unlikely that you're going to win it. So if we do that, if we could get to the group stages of Europe, you would probably take that above the cup runs.
It sounds like a kind of close but no cigar type season, but you're happy enough with that?
Well, that's Hibs, isn't it? Really, it's the story of our life.
Very realistic analysis from Matty there, Liam.
Yeah, look, I think if they can win a trophy and finish 4th, I still think that's a marvellous season. I've always said if you finish 10th and win a trophy, it's a better season than finishing 3rd without one. Because those are the memories, those are the things you remember, those are the memories you have for your entire life if you can win a cup. And for the teams out with Celtic and Rangers, it doesn't come along too often. So that's got to be the chief ambition, as high up the league as possible. To get into the group stage of Europe, then brilliant. It's odds against. I mean, we're talking about the group stage of the Conference League at a point where they haven't played the second leg of this tie against Escaldes, so they need to turn that around first and foremost. But yeah, I think 4th and a trophy would be a wonderful season for Hibs. I think they're going to be in the mix for 3rd. I think there won't be much between they, Aberdeen and Hearts, I don't think. And they want to get Easter Road rocking. It's been too often over the last period of time where the Hibs fans have left their own stadium annoyed about something or lamenting a poor result against whoever. It doesn't matter who. Teams have been enjoying visiting Easter Road, I think, too much in recent years. They need to turn that into a fortress, and that'll be one of the first ambitions I would have thought of Lee Johnson going into this season. Matty's nodding his head because he knows 100%. He's left Easter Road too often and he's not been happy.
100%. I think we saw last season when we won, we had a derby win, we beat Celtic. We had a last-minute equaliser against Rangers right at the start of the season. These are the big moments that you enjoy in a season, and we need to have more of those moments this season to make it memorable. Definitely.
I think, Matty, I think you leave us at the end of this podcast in a very positive mood, so I think that's the perfect place to end our...
Maybe hoping that's still the case on Thursday night.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a good job this is getting out before that game. Anyway, thank you very much to Long Bangers podcaster Matty Fairnie and to BBC commentator Liam McLeod. You have been listening to the Scottish Football Podcast and another in our series of Premiership previews. Please join Liam and myself again for the next one tomorrow.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.